I'm David Smith, an assistant professor of graphic design at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. The title of this presentation is Design Thinking in and Out of Prison. This case study is about a collaboration between two student groups. One group is in prison, while the other group is on a college campus. The purpose of the collaboration was to use design thinking to solve a communication problem. An important aim of the project was to engage the two student groups. Of course, one group has abundant resources, while the other group would be considered a vulnerable and underserved population. First, let's set the context for how this came about. Is teaching in prison something that really happens? According to the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison, there was as many as 300 higher education programs in U.S. prisons just 2 years ago. The education shows up in a variety of ways, from high school equivalency to vocational and even college credits, as you can see from this list. We'll see there are a lot of reasons education in prison is a good idea, but for starters, the 2013 RAND report informs us that receiving an education while in prison reduces risk of repeating criminal behavior and may help with employment after release. This project was conducted under the supervision of the Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project. Prison Arts, as I like to call it, offers CEU certificate courses and actual college credits through Auburn University. They work with qualified volunteers that teach in 12 correctional facilities throughout Alabama. Prison Arts started with a single poetry class and grew into what it is today through the arts. I got involved in the organization through the arts, teaching drawing classes. In the spring of 2019, I taught a course at Staton Correctional Facility in Elmore, Alabama. The primary objective of the course was to teach the students about design thinking. But we wanted them to tackle a specific problem, a communication problem. For some reason, only a small percentage of the correctional facility residents would sign up for prison arts courses. Residents that did take the courses were overwhelmingly happy with them. How could we get their fellow residents to also benefit from the classes? Prison Arts' primary way to communicate about upcoming courses with residents of correctional facilities is to send flyers to the facility, who then post them on bulletin boards. The Staton students could only create their flyer ideas by hand and had no way to create and display their ideas in a finished manner. So we enlisted the help of 6 Auburn University graphic design students to interpret and produce the Staton students' ideas. The first step was to develop empathy with potential students. The Staton students were asked to write down what they thought was breaking down the communication from Prison Arts, since they themselves were part of the targeted user group. As an assignment, they were then asked to interview fellow residents about their interest in prison arts courses and what they saw as possible issues. Here are a few quotes from that assignment. The most significant insight was about how course topics are valued rather than how they are communicated. Possibly the value of the courses could be better communicated. You might ask, why would they have fear of failing? Or why wouldn't they take the course? They don't have anything better to do, do they? Well, you must realize that many of the residents' experience with the learning and education has been less than ideal. Many of them already have a history of failure and don't want to invite a replay without a potential reward. The students came up with 6 major discoveries as a result of developing empathy with the target students of prison arts. The first was to use common language rather than academic language when communicating about a course. Potential students were easily intimidated by academic language. The students discovered that some Staton residents thought the prison arts classes were reserved only for certain groups and not for everyone. The residents definitely see themselves in administrative groupings that does affect their privileges. So this was an important insight. The obvious input for the communication was to make it attention-grabbing. Most all of the various papers that are pinned on the bulletin boards are a standard size and in black and white. So using color, images, interesting choice of font, or size of the paper itself, any number of things could make it stand out. As we've already learned, communicating a valued benefit is important. Somehow, we need to the communication should imply a valued benefit. Students also felt that it should address the needs and desires of potential students. That prison art should find out what students want to learn and make those classes part of the course offerings. Now, barriers might be what you leave out of the flyer. Not knowing who to contact on the prison staff about signing up for the course, not knowing the scope of commitment or the duration of the course could discourage some from signing up. Next, we wanted to be sure we were addressing the right problem. Here is our original challenge question. How can we better communicate or offer educational opportunities to you? While the students thought the original question was fine, they explored ways to make it more personal or conversational. From the student's perspective, the bottom line benefit of the prison arts courses is personal growth. Prison arts courses tend to be more liberal arts oriented that nurture personal growth versus obvious employable skills. Unfortunately, personal growth is not as valued as practical skills to most of the residents. While there was much discussion about course topics offered, it was not our intention to change the nature of the prison arts program. Now, following are a few examples of the ideation, the composition, production, and testing between the Staton students and the Auburn students. Staton students were asked to come up with flyer ideas to better communicate and encourage enrollment in two courses, in a science fiction writing course and a poetry writing course. Here are 3 examples of Staton students' layout concepts for a flyer. Some students were not comfortable sketching, but all were encouraged to find a way to communicate their ideas. Here are 3 examples of Auburn students' interpretations and compositions of the Staton students' flyer concepts. When Staton students received back layouts from Auburn students, they would give their own critique of the work. Then as an assignment, they would get honest reactions from their fellow residents. The Staton residents were tough critics, but they expressed their true reactions to the flyer concepts. This collaboration went back and forth between the 2 student groups, and eventually, certain reactions repeatedly surfaced as meaningful. This list is a set of working guidelines the Staton students agreed should be followed when creating a flyer for a new course being offered. I'll leave this slide up here for just a bit so you can read it. We thought we had some good ideas, but then we bumped into current realities. Unfortunately, mostly due to budget reasons, we had to forego some of the guidelines. For instance, no color printing, just black and white. No paper other than the standard 8.5 by 11, and no custom graphics. Also, prison arts pushed back on the idea of not using the logo. The idea of whether or not to use the logo is an interesting one, and ultimately the prison arts staff has a broader perspective on the aggregate prison population's perceptions of the program, which goes beyond a single correctional facility, and I tend to agree with the decision to continue to use the logo. So the working guidelines had to be amended. As a final deliverable to prison arts, the Auburn students created flyer layout templates. Here are 2 examples of flyer layout templates that follow the amended guidelines. While the Staton students came up with ideas even beyond the flyers for communicating about prison arts courses, the realities of how things are done mitigates the opportunity at this time. However, there are positive things to be found from the project. Through exit surveys, the Staton students revealed that they appreciated learning a new way to approach problem solving. The communication pathway between the Staton students and the Auburn students was difficult due to a lack of real conversation. All work and comments were curated by me, the instructor, which proved to be a bottleneck. In spite of that, the two groups did collaborate and created a body of work. Additionally, the groups managed to produce something that was useful to prison arts. Results from empathy exercises and flyer testing provided data that prison arts will use to continue to improve how they work with prison populations. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time and attention.